Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the January 13th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm President-elect Matt Busick, standing in for Catherine Staub again this week. So this is opportunity number 2 to get out of my rookie status. So I appreciate you being here. As we ready ourselves for today's presentation, I encourage all of you to carefully consider the words we are about to recite. Oftentimes, less really is more. And I'd suggest the Pledge of Allegiance and our 4-way test offer just the right inspiration for what's to come in Beth Niggett's presentation. So if you could please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, the Rotary 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Great. Now, please wave to your fellow Rotarians and guests.
You have to like stick out your tongue and hold it. Not really.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next step. I'd like to wish Rotarian Dick Stauffer a happy birthday today. Dick has been a Rotarian since 1977. Recently transferred his membership to the Rotary Club of Des Moines. Welcome, Dick, if you're watching through the interwebs, and enjoy your birthday. Okay, there are sign-up sheets on your tables for the Iowa Wolves Rotary Night on February 5th. When you buy tickets to the game, a portion of the price you pay goes to Rotary's End Polio Now campaign. Even if you can't attend the game, consider buying tickets anyway. Right, Jeff?
Exactly. Make sure you go.
You can donate your tickets to a youth group, and a deserving youthful sports enthusiast can attend instead. Thanks to Jeff Stickle for representing our club on this important committee. Folks, there's no denying it. It's winter, although hard to tell. We are going to be moving into winter, I think, tomorrow in a significant way. But we're doing our best to make February a month of fun despite the winter blahs. In addition to the Wolves game on the 5th, there's also the February Fling on February 17 that will be hosted by my wife and me. You should have received, or soon will be receiving, a postcard in the mail about this. Looks like this. We're also sending an email later today that will give you an opportunity to sign up online. So the Rsvp Deadline is Thursday, February 3rd. One of the things that I've learned through the pandemic is that you need to be fast on your feet. All of you know my feet do a little bit of shaking, so I appreciate the grace and patience of letting me be who I am. Today, unfortunately, Tim Lilowitz can't be here, so we are going to give Beth Niggett, after Sue Woody has a quick announcement, but Beth is going to stand up and introduce herself. So if all of you could please be gracious, and look forward to hearing Beth's presentation. Sue?
And there, not as tall as Matt. Thank you, President-elect Matt. Another fun February event, and that is our Rotary Readers Book Club. So we would like to have you all join us. February 23rd, we do this every other month over the lunch hour. We meet at 11:30. Right now, to be safe, we are meeting via Zoom. And I would like to introduce the book that we're going to be reading next. It's called Bewilderment by Richard Powers. And Richard Powers won a Pulitzer Prize for his previous novel. So it's called The Overstory. So I just want to read you a little tiny snippet from the back cover. With its soaring descriptions of the natural world, its tantalizing vision of life beyond, and its account of a father and son's ferocious love, Bewilderment marks Richard Powers' most intimate and moving novel. At its heart lies the question, how can we tell our children the truth about this beautiful, imperiled planet? So, sounds really fantastic. I hope you will join us February 23rd. And this is an especially important meeting because we will be meeting to gather ideas for what we will be reading for the next year. So we have 6 more titles after that. Hope you can join us. It's a lot of fun, and it really, let me also just take this opportunity. It would count on your 2022 reading challenge at the Des Moines Public Library. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist, but join us. We want everyone in our community to read, to think, to talk about what they read and share. So please join us, dmpl.org. Just reading 1 book a month, and it's going to challenge you. If you love mysteries or you love romance and that's all you ever read, we want you to get out of your box and we want you to read. And the best way to do that is to join our reading club. So hope to see you on February 23rd at 11:30. Thank you so much. And Beth, I will introduce Beth, our speaker. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Before, I wanted to make sure, Kitty, is it supposed to have a green ring?
Yeah.
Okay. A little technical difficulty? There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, well, so I am Beth Niggett. I am Executive Vice President at EMC Insurance Companies, just right down the street, and been in this role since 2020, January of 2020. Prior to that, I was Senior Vice President, Chief People Officer, which includes human resources and the teams that I currently support. Still support the human resources teams, but in addition have our corporate strategy team, innovation, marketing, communications, and it's a great team to be on. EMC is an exciting company, proud to be a good community partner with Des Moines businesses. We have, as you probably know from Bruce Kelly, former CEO, who's good to see here today. It's a great insurance company. We do business across the nation, writing property and casualty, commercial lines coverage, and we are continuing to look for ways to grow and make sure that we are expanding our footprint. But primarily, what we're interested in is improving lives. And that is our why, and it's a why that we take very seriously and embed that into everything that we do. And so I am extremely proud of the team that I serve with and support. Scott Jean, our current CEO, is here today. And just by testament to the kind of organization that EMC is, Bruce was our CEO for 28 years. 28 years. He was at EMC for over 30 years. Scott Jean was actually an intern at EMC. And so it's a really wonderful story to be able to tell when we can talk about having individuals serve their professional career or a good part of their professional career at such a dynamic company that puts people first and leads with improving lives. So again, it's a great place to be. And that ties in with what I wanted to talk to you today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we will, okay, hold on here. We'll get there.
You know what?
Kitty, I may have you drive.
Sounds good.
If that's okay.
You bet.
All right. So, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In order to start this conversation, I think it's important to just take a moment to recognize the evolution of this discussion and how it has continued to evolve and grow and deepen. From this slide, the takeaway is that early on, 60s, 70s, 80s into the 90s, the focus was on diversity on the demographics. And we need that, and that's not something that we want to lose. But how we have evolved is now the conversation to include diversity and inclusion. And that inclusion piece being, we value differences. Differences matter. And so it's more than simply, how do we build a team where we have differences in demographics, but how do we build a team where we have those differences in our demographics and we actively value and want to include those differences because they add value. So today where we're at, we've gone from diversity to diversity and inclusion, and if you notice there's an E, DE and I, equity. So we've got diversity, which is the differences in our demographics and all the dimensions of diversity, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Then we have inclusion, valuing what those differences bring to the table. Equity means that we are going to provide, taking the action to remove the barriers and the obstacles, so equity becomes equitable access. Equitable access to resources and opportunities. All three are key: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's where we are in our current state. So next slide. But why? Why do we have to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? I mean, is it one of those things that's just, it's a nice to have? Do we really need to do this? What does it mean for our business? Anybody who has spent a little bit of time even just Googling, you do a quick Google search on diversity, equity, and inclusion and in business, and you will come away with a pretty amazing repository of data, not just anecdotal, feel-good data, but hard data that supports why diversity, equity, and inclusion is a business imperative. Anybody here who's in business would want to think about, let's see, what can we do, and I don't really care if it adds to my top or bottom line. Probably not. We're all interested in better business outcomes, better profitability, better results, increased customer base. How do we create better business? DE&I is a key part of that. When we have organizations that actively embed diversity, equity, and inclusion into their organization, into their culture, these are just a few of the numbers. And these are basic numbers that companies who embed diversity, equity, inclusion from a gender perspective, stronger profitability by 21%. Ethnic diversity, those companies will outperform other companies that do not by 33%. When we actively embed and authentically, not lip service, authentically embed DE&I, you can increase your engagement, your culture, increase retention, and has anybody here heard about the Great Resignation and war on talent? Just a little bit, yep. Innovation. DE&I sparks innovation. When you think about the premise behind innovation, innovation is not homogeneity. Innovation is taking different perspectives and those different perspectives being incorporated into differing demographics, experiences, people who look differently than me, than us, bringing them together so we can challenge each other and come up with better, out-of-the-box thinking. That's innovation. Improving the quality of decision-making, not just about the status quo or a yes person. Challenging, actively challenging to get to a better result, and enhancing the reputation and brand recognition. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg of what diversity, equity, inclusion can bring to our businesses. Next slide. But where do you start? Where do you start in order to embed DE&I in an organization? It is not easy, it is messy, and it can lead to some very uncomfortable and challenging conversations. However, anybody here engage in golf? or running or cooking, if I'm striking any kind of interest, is there anybody here who thinks that if you haven't, let's say, run a marathon, that you can wake up tomorrow and go run a marathon? Well, you might, but you'll pay for it, right? I don't golf. If I were to go golf tomorrow, it would not be pretty at all. I wouldn't be able to do it. If someone who doesn't know their way around a kitchen, you're probably not going to start out making a beautiful paella. It takes practice. It takes a discipline, and it takes a commitment to education and learning. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is no different. However, it does not have to be painful. It doesn't have to ignite that initial fear of, oh my goodness, I'm now going to learn about everything that is bad about myself. Not at all. Because if we can remove from the framework good or bad and simply come at a standpoint of I'm learning and I'm growing, that's when we can get lit. And I think, and our organization is no different. Any organization where I've talked to folks who are in the midst of a DE&I journey and discussion, there's bound to be discomfort. But there's discomfort when you are training to run a marathon. There's probably some discomfort and frustration when you're trying to improve your golf game. There's probably some frustration when you're trying to create this amazing dessert and it falls flat. You know, so like anything, how do we give ourselves a little bit of grace and patience and extend that to others as well, so that we leave each other feeling whole as we're having these very important, critical conversations about how do we learn and grow. And it can start with a common set of definitions of what diversity, equity, inclusion is and what it is not. It can allow us to take our shoulders down, have a deep breath, not have our blood pressure go up, and where we kind of get to that defensive mode of thinking, oh, I don't want to talk about this because it can be uncomfortable. I might learn something about myself that I realize maybe I could learn and grow and do something better, but that's okay. So at EMC, we began with a common set of definitions. What diversity is, valuing the representation of all of our varied identities and differences collectively and as individuals. Equity, seeking to ensure fair treatment, opportunity, and fairness in access. Access is key. Equitable access to information and resources. And that might mean, when we talk about access, because of who I am as an executive vice president at EMC, I might have a little bit of a different access to Scott Jean, our CEO, than say somebody who is an individual contributor. But perhaps that individual contributor is a rock star that we've seen that they really would benefit in just having some discussions with the CEO, with another EVP, with another officer. How can I help ensure that there is access to those resources? So it's not just a level, it's not just gender or race or ethnicity. It is equitable access and inclusion, so that we have a culture where our team members feel included. You belong, you matter. Your voice and you are seen, you're heard, you're valued. And I would say what's probably most important is what DE&I is not. It is not zero sum. It is not either or. It is not good versus bad. It is both and. And sometimes when we have been in a position of being in the majority, when other voices are heard, it may feel like my voice doesn't matter as much. However, that's equity in having other voices who maybe have not been heard coming to the forefront, or at least coming on par. And actually, Scott and I were talking about this presentation, And as we were visiting, we were talking about this being kind of like a chorus and a symphony. And you can start out with one voice, a cappella, which may be beautiful and moving and clear and just gorgeous. And yet, can it be better when maybe the voice that began was a tenor, and you're gonna add an alto, and then you're gonna add a soprano, and you're gonna add a bass, and then you're gonna add more of all of those different ranges, and then you're going to add a symphony, and you're going to add musicians. And so what you create is this beautiful, moving experience. And that's where DE and I can come together to really create something moving and impactful. And again, recognizing in that framework of it is both and, it is not zero sum and not binary. And that has been important for us to have in our conversations as we want to bring people along and move our organization along. Next slide. This particular slide, when we talk about the different dimensions of diversity, has been really impactful at EMC. And part of this is because this helps us appreciate every single one of us has a diversity story. Every person in this room has a diversity story. Where do you see yourselves in the primary element of diversity? Primary being, that's something that we can't change. I cannot change the fact that I am a woman. I'm a woman. I cannot change the fact that I'm white. So my gender, my race, my ethnicity are things I cannot change. Those also help inform, based on my experiences, how I view information, how I process information. That happens to every single one of us. Think about, I'm gonna go back to, I started out my career as an attorney, doing trial work. And when you have to do an investigation, and let's say it was a car accident, and maybe there were 3 or 4 witnesses to a car accident. Do you think those 3 to 4 eyewitnesses gave me the exact same account of that car accident? No, never. They had different vantage points. Maybe somebody was viewing the accident from across the street. Maybe somebody was viewing the accident from several different feet away. They bring in a different vantage point. But it was my job to make sure I got all of those witness statements to help inform a more robust truth. Similar with the dimensions of diversity, we come at things differently because of our life experiences. In that primary dimension, those dimensions are critical to our life experiences. Because of my gender and what I experienced when I was searching for my first job, absolutely informs my experiences. My husband, who's also an attorney, didn't have near the same experience that I did when I was searching for my first job. He was not referred to as the little missus. I was. He was not asked questions about, gee, did you really want to do trial work? Because that's a man's job. He didn't get asked those questions. I did. That sticks with me, and it informs and influences. It doesn't stagnate. I want to make sure I learn and grow. But we all have those experiences. Then you get into the secondary dimensions of diversity. Where did you grow up? A small town? A big town? Did you grow up, did you go to graduate school? Did you go through trade school? What were your life experiences? Big family, small family, religious views? Those things are also important in shaping how we see the world. The workplace. My role as an executive vice president informs and shapes how I view information and how I process information differently than somebody who has just joined our organization as an intern or in an entry-level position. Not good or bad, not right or wrong, different perspectives. Deeply important to understand those differences matter. And so when you take that whole collective together, you begin to get an appreciation for the fact that, okay, I know that my colleague, they're from a big family, they're from a family that grew up in a small town, they were the first one to go to college. That's going to shape how they see the world and how they might process. Different than me, who grew up here in Des Moines, went to a big school. So these dimensions of diversity matter, and when we attach that level of understanding and respect, then we can get to a place where we're not looking at each other as us versus them. We can be a part of the same team and value what each other brings to the table. Next slide. So, as we began to put a framework together, we had to figure out what questions are we going to ask of ourselves as an organization in order to move forward. And so part of it was coming up with what questions do we ask that matter? And what we decided is, what does success look like at EMC? How will DE&I impact our business, our organization? Why do we need to focus on DE&I? What does it mean? Where will our specific efforts be focused? What do the next 3 years look like? How are we going to measure? Straightforward questions, lots of time and energy spent in order to come up with answers. We put a task force together. Again, part of as we're doing this, it couldn't just be, well, hey, Scott, what do you think? Let's you and I tackle these questions, then we're gonna push it out to the rest of the organization. That would not be very inclusive of us. So it began with a task force, asking people across our various branches, in different disciplines, underwriting, claims, IT, actuary, people who just joined our organization, people who had been at EMC for decades, women, men, Asian, African American, LGBTQIA. What does this mean? So we pulled together a cross section. Next slide. And we came up with our framework. We came up with our vision of success, our mission, our case for change, why it was important to us. And so we used this as we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. We hired our DE&I officer, 2 additional full-time resources dedicated to advancing this work in conjunction and in deep collaboration with the rest of the organization. We created the DE&I council and resource groups because we need voices. And as we're getting these voices, these questions are coming up with, hey, you know what, we write a lot of insurance coverage to municipalities. In 2020, it was quite the year of some social unrest. So we engaged in conversations about how we were providing insurance protection to municipalities, including police departments. What did that mean? What did that mean for us as a business? Were we complicit in certain aspects of social unrest that was going on, or were we taking a good perspective in this business? Very deep conversations, and where we arrived at was, you know what, absolutely we're going to continue to write this type of policy and provide this type of insurance protection to municipalities. And also what we're going to do from a risk improvement and mitigation, we are going to help those municipalities get the kind of training that is needed. It's going to mitigate losses. It's going to make that department and city and community better. But it began with the conversations we were having about things that directly impact our business. What about our agency force? What about the products that we're offering? The fastest growing entrepreneurial small startup demographic is Black African American women. Are we offering insurance products that could serve that demographic? These are the kind of conversations where DE&I becomes that business imperative. How do we do better in addition to a culture? And these discussions have been met, not easy discussions, but yet our team members appreciate that we are having these discussions. We don't even have to say, we've got all the answers. A lot of times we can say, we don't have the answers, but we're going to have a discussion. And you're part of this discussion. And it builds trust and inspires better engagement. Next slide. We're focused on 3 primary pillars right now: our workforce, our workplace, and our community. So the workforce, what does our workforce look like? How do we increase representation? Because representation does matter, as it's the gateway for the additional elements and dimensions of diversity. How do we ensure that as we increase our dimensions of diversity, that we are in an organization that is open and welcoming and inclusive, and what does that look like? Workforce, what are the different types of technologies and workspaces? We have meetings, and now we know that maybe that's somebody who's hearing impaired, but on a Zoom call, they may not be able to hear everything, and so we have a transcription able to be accessed on our Zoom calls. Again, that inclusive nature, asking those questions. And then the community, how do we show up in our community? What are we supporting? What are we sponsoring? And is that reflective of improving lives and fostering diversity, equity, inclusion as a good community partner in our organization? And getting the voices of our team members and community stakeholders. Next slide. But the journey never ends. And so we will continue to evolve, and we continue to have deeper and meaningful conversations where we challenge ourselves and we get to a better state. And I put up some descriptive words there. Continuing evolution. We lead with empathy, and part of that is asking questions. How can we be curious? How do I come at this thinking, all right, well here I am as an executive vice president in this organization. Certainly I must have some answers. Sometimes I do, and a lot of times I don't. But it's having the curiosity to say, okay, what does this look like? How can we do it better? And losing the ego, and again, being able to ask those questions. Innovation, making sure that we bring folks who have different backgrounds together, and we can challenge each other because we come up with a better result. But doing it with respect, with empathy, with grace. Humanity, because I would like to be a part of an organization and a community that embraces differences with the goal of making us better. And this not only helps make our businesses stronger, it makes our communities a stronger and better place. So I love this slide because it sums up kind of a journey collectively and as society. We talk about equality, giving equal access. So you can see that equal access, everybody gets that same type of box to look over the fence and see if they can watch that soccer game. Well, but you'll notice everyone getting that same box doesn't really work for the individual who's still not tall enough to see over. Equity, equitable resources, so you get what you need to be able to see over the fence. But justice is taking a look at what is the barrier? What is the barrier that's standing in the way? It's that wooden fence. So what if we remove that wooden fence and then everybody is able to view the game and be a part of the game? And that's the goal. It'll be an ongoing goal, but it's one that we are very excited and happy to be a part of. Not easy, be a little messy, like I said, but a worthy goal because it's an opportunity to do better and learn and grow. So the call to action, what does this mean for each of us? Lots of things, and it can start right here, right now. Nobody even has to have had DE&I education or a certification or anything else. It's simply a desire to learn. And it can start with, what can you do? What is your place in this work? Can you foster a conversation? Can you engage with somebody who has a different background than you? Who comes at things different than you? How do you make sure that you're looking in your organizations? Are you mindful of those voices that maybe have been underrepresented, perhaps marginalized? How can you engage with those voices? When you see something that looks a little off, say something. And it doesn't have to be, I heard this phrase the other day and I love it. It's not calling out, it's calling in. And you're gonna call in because you care about your organization and your people so you can learn and do better. And it's not calling out from a standpoint of embarrassment or humiliation or shame. It's from a standpoint of, hey, Beth, you know what, I noticed in this meeting that you continued to talk over and interrupt when somebody was speaking. I just want you to know that because I know that you are committed to being a better leader and that might help. So I'm just gonna share that with you with love and respect. Great, it's calling in. How do we even do that with that empathetic voice? Surrounding yourself with people who are different than you. Holding yourself accountable and acting. Is there a resource group? Can you just simply commit to maybe once a month, once a week, Googling or looking for those different resources on how you can learn about what could diversity, equity, inclusion mean in your office, in your company, with your role, within your community, with your volunteering. What could that look like? Volunteer, educate yourself, and if something feels a little bit uncomfortable, know that's where you're growing. And I go back to that analogy of running a marathon. Anybody who has run, I don't know, even a 5K, doesn't even have to be a marathon. You might wake up and after you were out there running the day before, woo, those legs hurt. Or man, you're a little bit stiff and going up and down the stairs is a little bit hard. But what do we stop? No. We lean into that just a little bit more because that's where the growth occurs. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Hey Beth, very nice presentation. Thank you very much. Very inspiring. So I'm going to voice this to you. A large organization. You've got a lot of people. People that are going to embrace this, which I think is fabulous, really are growth mindset oriented. There's a lot of us that are still fixed mindset oriented. How do you get people, because you want to be inclusive, how do you get people who are fixed mindset oriented to be more open to embracing something like this?
Excellent question. And so I'll repeat the question. This does require that growth mindset. And thank you for that reference because also love Simon Sinek. We just talked about this earlier this week within our organization, growth versus fixed mindset. How do you begin to influence to create more of that open, infinite growth mindset versus that fixed mindset? Slowly. This is not a flip of the switch. This does not happen, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen in 12 months. And so I think that expectation of going slow, and being intentional, part of it takes that intentionality, and the work that has to be done is slow. But how do you prioritize? So if rather than, and today it's a lot of platitudes. How do you boil that down to what matters most to your organization, to whatever that group is that you're a part of? How do you tap into something that is meaningful to those who do still have a fixed mindset? Perhaps if it's a leader of a department, maybe they're concerned about turnover. Maybe they're concerned about meeting particular growth goals. How do you tap into that and have a discussion about, okay, are you willing to give this a chance? And to understand and validate, yes, what we're asking here is for some vulnerability, but I'm going to do this as well. I'm going to be there alongside with you. And by no means is EMC complete on this journey, nor will we ever be. Every day there are questions that come up that give me pause and think, I don't know how to answer that. This is a sticky question, and how do we answer that? Because again, that goal is, it'd be antithetical to exclude those voices, and you can't do that. And so if you have that fixed mindset, if there's somebody who's saying, oh my goodness, we're just doing this, and this is to shut down my voice. No, we need your voice. And so if you have a question, if you have a concern, let's get it out there on the table. Part of that is just understanding what are the challenges that you face. And so it's not an easy answer, but if you can prioritize and understand what the impetus is for that fear or that challenge, then you can work to build the bridge, and it will be a slow bridge building process. But I think that recognizing that this isn't a quick fix, and understanding that you respect somebody for the mindset that they have, and this is a journey that's gonna take some time. But bringing it back to what matters to you. What would it look like to you? Yeah.
Okay, Beth.
Oh, Scott, yes.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is it really starts with each of you as an individual. Whether you're leading the organization or wherever you're at, become transparent, become vulnerable. I can't tell you how many times that Beth has come to me and said, Scott, you could have done better here. And creating that level of transparency with the people you work with, being vulnerable, being open. Because I screw up every day, and I've got Beth there to tell me what happens. But that makes me a better leader. So whether you're leading an organization or leading a department or leading a small group, start there. Be vulnerable, be transparent yourself. Ask for feedback, solicit feedback. That's how I get better as a leader. And then as people see that, they also become more transparent and vulnerable, because it's also a two-way street, isn't it, Beth?
It is, yes. So if I could, there was a very, again, this brings up these feelings of like, oh, this is hard. This is hard. We had a day of understanding last spring, and we had people all along the spectrum with regards to buy-in for diversity, equity, inclusion. Scott heard from several team members that, oh my gosh, I can't believe what Beth said during that day of understanding. She is really doing damage to diversity, equity, inclusion by what she said. I heard from other team members saying, okay, so when Scott made a couple comments, it didn't sit well. Okay, so Scott and I had a conversation, and Scott was able to share with me, okay, hey Beth, during that day of understanding, here's what I heard and here's some feedback. I did the same thing with him. And while it was really hard in the moment, I will tell you, Scott and I were like, oh my goodness, this is the work. This is like the work that it takes, and we were able, now, I'm sure Scott didn't wake up thinking, God, I can't wait to have that conversation with Beth today and tell her that how she screwed up. And I'm thinking, oh, how do I have this conversation with my boss about here's some feedback that I heard and how do we do this better? But we did, because we have a great amount of trust and respect for each other. And I know Scott's coming from this from a standpoint of amazing and good intent, as am I. So when you can come at it from that perspective, we're trying to move the organization forward. And here's some feedback that can make us better. Oh, and you had a question there.
I will defer to later, other than excellent presentation, and we would certainly like to add your voice to the Rotary Club.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you. I believe that Kitty does have my email, and so I would invite. I am passionate about this work, and sometimes my passion can be a bit of a downfall because that's where it can turn some people off. However, I would say if you do have questions and you would like to ask those, please let me know, and feel free. Kitty can send the email around, and I'd be happy to answer any questions by email. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of this community and this organization. I appreciate this time.
Thank you.
Boy, that seems like a long ways from my chair. Beth, thank you so much. Genuinely appreciated your comments. As a member of this community, it is so gratifying to know that you and your organization is working so hard to bridge barriers across the spectrum. So thank you very much. And as the father of two daughters, who I find incredibly competent, Elena, maybe you could quick stand up and say hello to everyone. My guest today, Elena Music. It really is extraordinary to know that this is taking place, and kids like mine, kids like yours, will have an opportunity to march into making Des Moines a better community, the world a better community. So thank you. We're going to donate a book in your honor to the Des Moines Public Library, so you're still here. This book will be added to the collection of books in the library's Rotary Rsv Reader van, a mobile library made possible as a result of our club's $40,000 community grant donation last year. Okay, so now we are moving on to what's coming next. Next week, January 20th, Shane Ratcliffe, General Manager of the Mid-American Energy Complex, Recplex, Recplex will be here to explain what's going on there. Brad Kruger from Intuitive Surgical will be here to talk about past, present, and the future of robotic surgery on January 27th. And on February 3, Kim Perez, President and CEO of the Greater Des Moines Botanical Gardens, will be here to bring us up to speed on what she's doing. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being part of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. We are adjourned.